at least.
Admit it. I nearly had you.
Nearly counts for nothing, Shay. And besides, no. That was just luck.
I make my own luck.
Shay Patrick Cormac is not a traitor in the traditional sense. He's something far rarer and far more unsettling. A man who breaks with a righteous cause because it refuses to look at the consequences of its righteousness. Shay is not driven by ambition, power, or even order. He is driven by aftershocks, literal, moral, and spiritual. He is the assassin who did not reject freedom, but rejected recklessness disguised as virtue. So when it comes to Shay Cormac is one of the most dangerous figures in the Assassin's Creed canon. Not because he's the strongest fighter or the smartest tactician, but because he's the one who learned too much. And his story is not about switching sides. It's about what happens when lived experience exposes the blind spots of belief systems that claim moral certainty. Shay's not defined by betrayal. He's defined by disillusionment with abstraction. So where most assassins operate in the realm of ideals, freedom, balance, resistance, Shay becomes anchored in consequence. He doesn't abandon the creed out of ambition or fear. He abandons it because it fails the stress test of reality. So with the creed, so before Lisbon, Shay exists in what philosophers would call a closed moral universe. The Assassin Creed provides meaning without ambiguity, purpose without personal accountability, brotherhood without dissent. And like many ideologically driven characters in fiction and history, Shay's early loyalty resembles religious faith more than critical conviction. The creed tells him nothing is true, everything is permitted. But in practice, the Brotherhood behaves as if some things are unquestionable and some authorities are beyond challenge. And this is where Shay's arc quietly diverges from characters like Ezio, because Ezio's world is already fractured. He grows into doubt. Shay begins inside certainty, and certainty is far more fragile than skepticism.
The space, where the hell were you two?
We're out hunting. What happened here?
My men were attacked by some English sea dogs.
Why, Captain Joseph, couldn't you fight them all off by yourself like you're always saying?
It is Capitaine Louis-Joseph Gauthier, Chevalier de la Vérendrye. And you are dreaming if you think any training could make you into a proper assassin. Do you even know what that means? It means being responsible for an ancient and proud tradition. It means obeying your mentor without question. How else will we ensure freedom for the human race?
Them's pretty words, Chevalier. But I don't feel too free at the moment.
Well then, feel educated! You simp!
Gentlemen, stop! We got a common enemy, and I reckon he's close.
The Royal Navy attacked my vessel and forced my men to flee. We are stranded, and what is worse, the smugglers we were supposed to meet have been taken prisoner.
Shay and I'll free those smugglers. You treat your wounded.
You are late.
Oh, what did I miss?
Only the first hour of training,
We're always training, Kesogowaase.
and will continue to do so.
Do not waste your words. Shay abhors improvement as much as cats abhor leashes.
Hey,
A pity. The boy has so much potential. But so little discipline.
all right. All right. What would you have me do?
Well played.
Shay, I hear you've become quite the marksman.
Generous gift. Thank you, mentor.
My ship awaits, Achilles. The people of Haiti will make good use of your supplies. I trust you will retrieve what has been lost.
Lost?
The Templars stole two precious artifacts, a manuscript of ancient wisdom and a box that allows one to understand its language.
I have tracked the Templar as far as this coast, but I fear the rest is up to you, my friend.
Farewell, Adewale. Whoever controls the artifacts can access precursor sites of power. We must recover them, or none are safe.
Assassin!
It's never too late to ruin Templar plans, Master Washington.
But my plans are already in motion. Even leading you here has given my allies time to escape. Thank you for making my end a quick one.
And thank you for revealing your master plan, you scheming snake.
This cannot be. No! Do you even know what that is?
An ancient artifact. Treasure from those who came before.
Yes. It matters not. Some of the greatest scientific minds of all Europe could not make it work.
Now all I need is the manuscript, and all shall be revealed. I'll take that, you Templar dog.
No! You have no idea what you're doing, fool!
Keeping the people free from your control.
How free will you be when the French undermine these squabbling colonies?
These colonies would be far better off without the Templars pulling the strings.
We bring order from chaos. If everything is permitted, no one is safe.
Even the devil can quote scripture to suit his own purposes.
Lisbon is near as large as London or Paris. Are you sure you can find this one place?
Sword clear as day, Hope. It's a convent, right close by the harbor. I might have visited the sisters once or twice.
Given your present knowledge of the site, this duty falls upon you. You understand what must be done?
Find the precursor temple and retrieve the piece of Eden.
Finally obtained a ship for crossing the ocean. Have no worries. I will keep the Morgans safe in New York.
Thank you. Liam and I will leave straight away.
Liam is unavailable at present. Your crew and ship await. Be careful, Shay. Pieces of Eden are powerful relics.
The Lisbon earthquake is not merely a tragedy, but is a philosophical indictment. Because up until that moment, the assassin's actions are justified by distance. Distance from civilians, distance from consequences, distance from moral reckoning. So Lisbon collapses that distance because the earthquake turns ideology into rubble and bodies, and it forces Shay to confront a truth that most assassins never have to witness directly. With good intentions do not negate catastrophic outcomes. And this moment, it echoes the real-world philosophical ruptures, like Oppenheimer after Hiroshima, soldiers returning from wars fought for freedom, scientists confronting unintended consequences of discovery. The assassins are playing with forces that they do not fully understand, operating under the assumption that their moral alignment grants them immunity from error. And Lisbon proves that assumption false. And once that illusion breaks, it cannot be repaired.
How could God do this to them?
God had nothing to do with this.
Now, a crucial distinction here. Now, Shay does not simply walk away after this, because walking away would mean accepting that Lisbon was tragic, but accidental. So Shay, he cannot do that, because he sees a pattern, not an anomaly. The assassins, they dismiss Lisbon as collateral damage, and Shay, he recognizes it as structural failure. And this is where his path becomes irreversible, because Shay, he realizes that the Brotherhood, it prioritizes the creed over human life, that knowledge is hoarded, not questioned, and that dissent is treated as heresy. In this sense, Shay resembles figures like Haytham Kenway, but with less cynicism. Kima Greggs in The Wire, realizing that the system eats its own, and John Marston, understanding that the government will never stop hunting him down. So once you see the machinery clearly, neutrality becomes impossible.
So what's the next city you want me to smite? What happened in Haiti happened in Portugal. A great earthquake. Thousands dead thanks to your damned manuscript!
This cannot be.
Shay, a person cannot start an earthquake.
A person meddling with these precursor machines could. You saw the box, Hope. The temple was filled to bursting with that kind of power. You made me slaughter innocents!
How dare you!
You defend him? Achilles sent me in there like Macandal sent his man in Haiti.
What the hell's going on? Stop this! The operation was delicate. Perhaps
You are shifting the earth itself. Who are you to decide what city falls next?
Get him out of here.
Liam is a fool if he thinks I'll leave this be. Achilles cannot be trusted. He must never find another precursor temple. I don't care that he's mentor, or that his family is dead. There's no excuse for this level of madness. There's no turning back now.
I had such hopes for you, Shay.
Achilles, I have to do this.
And what is it you're doing exactly? Stealing from your brothers? Betraying me?
Someone must make amends.
Make amends? You have no idea what you're doing. The future of the whole continent, maybe the whole world, is tied up in that manuscript.
Perhaps. But we don't have the right to decide that future.
The right! We have the responsibility!
We are responsible for killing innocents and destroying cities. This mad grab for power. It ends now.
I will not let you destroy everything we have built! Assassins! Stop him! Stop Shay!
That's enough.
Give back the manuscript, Shay. I'm sure Achilles...
I cannot! I will not let this happen again. All those souls lost. One more hardly matters.
Shay!
Now, Shay joining the Templars. Now, this is often misread as ideological conversion, but it's not, because he doesn't suddenly believe in control, hierarchy, or authoritarian order. What he believes in is containment, limitation, and prevention. And the Templars, they offer something that the assassins never do, which is the willingness to stop dangerous knowledge from being misused, acceptance of moral burden, and acknowledgement that order, while imperfect, it reduces chaos. Now, Shay chooses the side that admits the world is too dangerous for unchecked ideals, and this makes him closer to tragic figures like Arthur Morgan, choosing restraint over rebellion, or Cole Phelps enforcing law while knowing that it is flawed, and Ozymandias and Watchmen minus the God complex. So Shay doesn't believe. Now, he doesn't believe the Templars are pure. He believes that they are necessary.
Do you swear to uphold the principles of our order? And all that for which we stand?
I do.
And never to share our secrets, nor divulge the true nature of our work?
I do.
And to do so from now until death, whatever the cost?
I do.
Then we welcome you into our fold, brother. You are now a Templar, harbinger of a new world. May the Father of Understanding guide us.
May the Father of Understanding guide us.
So Shay's pursuit of former assassins is not vengeance. It is containment through violence, because each kill is preventative, not personal. And that distinction, it matters, because he doesn't relish it, he doesn't excuse it, he endures it. And this is why Shay feels heavier than most protagonists, I feel, in my opinion, because he carries what philosophers call moral residue, the guilt that remains even after choosing the least wrong option. Because unlike many characters, Shay does not get moral absolution, narrative forgiveness, ideological peace. He gets responsibility. And then we also move on into the archetypal roles and the mythic parallels when it comes to Shay Cormac. So most mythologies, they treat oaths as metaphysical anchors, because to break one is to rupture cosmic order. Shay, he violates this rule, and yet the universe does not collapse. Instead, it reveals something more unsettling, that sometimes the oath itself is the error. So the Assassin Creed, it functions like a sacred text, that we work in the dark to serve the light, that nothing is true, everything is permitted. But Shay, he encounters the unspoken addendum, which is so long as we never question ourselves. And the Lisbon disaster, it becomes his moment of moral awakening, not enlightenment, but disillusionment. Because, like Cassandra, who sees truth clearly and is punished not for being wrong, but for being inconvenient. So his attempt to warn the Brotherhood is treated as a betrayal before it ever becomes one. And this places Shay in a rare archetypal position, the oathbreaker who remains morally intact while the faithful drift into dogma. So he's not rejecting loyalty, he's rejecting blind loyalty, a far more dangerous force. And then we have empiricism as blasphemy. Now, Shay's greatest sin in the Assassin Order is not defiance, but it's really more so evidence, because he doesn't argue theology, he doesn't reinterpret doctrine. He simply says, look at what happened. And this makes him a heretic, in the classical sense, not because he denies his belief, but because he submits belief to reality. And historically, you have heretics. Heretics are often the first scientists, such as Galileo. How Galileo did not hate God, he measured the stars. And how Spinoza, he did not reject ethics, he rejected superstition. So Shay, he doesn't hate the creed. That's the thing. Like, Shay does not hate the creed itself. He tests it, and the test fails. And this is why Shay becomes so dangerous to the assassins, because he threatens the moral insulation that allows them to operate without accountability. Because if intentions matter more than outcomes, then no atrocity can ever truly be named as such. And Shay refuses that absolution. So, in this sense, he becomes a paradoxical protector. So, by opposing the assassins, he saves civilians. By killing the assassins, he preserves the original purpose that they have forgotten. So, he doesn't defend order or chaos, he defends consequence. And then there's also agency without glory. Now, unlike many tragic protagonists, Shay does not believe himself special. He does not think history depends on him. And this is very crucial because he never frames his actions as destiny. And this makes him closer to figures like Michael Corleone, who steps into violence not for power, but because retreat is no longer possible. Or such as Logan from Wolverine, whose violence is a burden, is a burden carried, not a thrill that is pursued. And even with samurais, where a samurai without a master whose code survives the institution that once gave it meaning. Shay kills not because he wants to, but because in action now has a body count. So every assassin that he confronts is a reminder of the man that he used to be and the future that he's trying to prevent. He's not hardened, he's scared, or scarred in this instant. And this is why Shay never becomes a triumphant villain or a righteous hero. He becomes something rarer, a man who accepts the moral contamination as the price of preventing greater harm. And then there's guilt as a compass, not punishment. See, most narratives they treat guilt as something to overcome, but Shay he treats guilt as something to carry forward, and it becomes his internal navigational system because he doesn't seek forgiveness, he doesn't seek validation, he doesn't seek closure, he seeks containment. In psychological terms, he's a study in post-traumatic moral injury, where the trauma is not just a disaster, it is the realization that the people he trusted were willing to repeat it. And that realization permanently fractures his sense of belonging. He joins the Templars not because that they are pure, but because they are honest about control. They're honest about wanting order. Where the assassins they hide behind the rhetoric of freedom. The Templars, at least, they acknowledge power and responsibility as intertwined. So Shay he chooses the lesser lie, or perhaps the lie that no longer pretends to be truth. And then we also go on into the philosophical lens of all this. So when it comes to the moral injury, so moral injury as the point of no return. Now, moral injury is not disappointment. It really is not losing faith, neither, but it's the psychic wound that occurs when one commits harm, believing that it itself is righteous, or one witnesses authority refuse accountability after undeniable harm. And Lisbon is not Shay's moral injury. See, the Brotherhood's response to Lisbon is when Achilles. So that's the thing. So really, Lisbon, it's not Shay's moral injury, but it's the Brotherhood's response to Lisbon that is his moral injury. Because when Achilles, when he dismisses Shay's warning, the injury becomes irreversible. Not because the Brotherhood made a mistake, but because they refuse to reinterpret themselves in light of it. And that's crucial. Because Shay does not experience the world as good versus evil collapsing. He experiences the moral framework itself, refusing to update. And this is ethical trauma, not ideological disagreement. Because comparable moments exist outside the franchise, where you have soldiers who discover civilian casualties were being labeled as acceptable losses, doctors who were ordered to follow protocols that they know will kill, and whistleblowers who were silenced not for being wrong, but for being inconvenient. So Shay's scream, when he says that I make my own luck, because he always says that a lot of times throughout the story, saying that I make my own luck. It's not necessarily now. At first, it does seem, it does seem at first, of course, in the beginning, of course, as bravado, but and later on throughout the story, it's not bravado, but it's more so the cry of someone that's severing themselves from borrowed moral authority. And then when it comes to disaster ethics, so traditional assassin ethics are intent-based. We fight to free humanity. And disaster ethics, it dismantles this entirely because it asks the questions that the creed itself cannot answer. How many deaths invalidate good intentions? When harm is irreversible, does apology even matter? If catastrophe is preventable, is belief an excuse? So Lisbon is not a tragedy, it is a systemic failure. Shay realizes something devastating in this, that a moral system that cannot absorb consequences is indistinguishable from fanaticism. And this reframes the assassin Templar conflict differently. Because the Brotherhood, treats the pieces of Eden like sacred tools. Shay sees them as high risk technologies with mass casualty potential. So, in modern terms, Shay becomes the only character thinking like a nuclear ethicist, a disaster risk analyst, and a containment strategist. And this is why he doesn't argue theology. He argues outcomes, and outcomes they indict the creed. And then there's also virtue epistemology, where in this case, most assassin protagonists they gain knowledge that empowers them. And Shay, he gains knowledge that obligates him. Because this right here, it asks, what kind of person are you once? What kind of person are you once you know the truth? Because after Shay learns the artifacts that they cause earthquakes, silence becomes complicity. Because remaining loyal, it would mean preserving fraternity over humanity, valuing unity over truth, treating knowledge as property instead of responsibility. And this is why Shay does not reform the Brotherhood from within. Because reform, it requires a listening institution. And the Brotherhood has already chosen certainty over inquiry. And Shay's defection is not rebellion, but it's simply epistemic integrity. Because he leaves not because he hates the creed, but because the truth has made, because really the truth, because truth itself has made staying immoral. And this places Shay closer to figures like Galileo challenging church cosmology, and then whistleblowers leaking classified harm, and scientists refusing to continue the dangerous experiments. So he doesn't defect for power, he defects because knowledge has teeth. And then you have the covenant ethics. So the Assassin Brotherhood operates as a covenant, not merely an organization, because its legitimacy it rests on sacred rules, mutual trust, a shared promise to protect the innocent. And when he violates that covenant by prioritizing doctrine over life, the covenant fractures. So here's the philosophical reversal here. The philosophical reversal here is that loyalty to a broken covenant becomes immoral. So Shay does not betray the Brotherhood. The Brotherhood betrays its own sacred obligation. So in covenant ethics, higher principles override institutional allegiance. And this is why Shay's actions, why they feel so personal and so final, because it does not lead it doesn't lead quietly. It actively opposes the Brotherhood, because allowing them to continue would be tacit approval of their violation. And this is tragic fidelity here, because fidelity, really it's not fidelity, fidelity not to people, not to tradition, but to the original moral promise that justified the Brotherhood's existence. And then you also have political realism without nihilism. And Shay's alignment with the Templars is often misunderstood as it's often misunderstood as ideological surrender, but it's not, because the colonial Templars that Shay joins are not utopians. They are containment theorists, and their logic is cold, but it's coherent. It's coherent with the fact that power exists, that it cannot be destroyed, and therefore it must be restrained. So Shay does not embrace domination; he embraces damage control, and this is political realism stripped of cruelty. He chooses a side that limits access to artifacts and reduces experimentation, accepts moral compromise to prevent apocalypse. And this makes Shay unique among the Assassin's Creed protagonists, because he's the only one who accepts that perfect freedom may be too dangerous for imperfect humans. And that's not cynicism. That right there is tragic maturity. And also, what I do want to do is I want to play a couple key scenes overall as philosophical turning points for Shay's character. So, of course, let's get right on into it. Now, the Lisbon earthquake. So, the Lisbon earthquake is not a tragedy. Once again, it's not merely a tragedy. It's a collapse of moral distance. Before Lisbon, Shay exists in what philosophers they call instrumental ethics, where we act for freedom, that oppressors they fall, and the people benefit from it. And this framework, it depends on distance, the geographic, emotional, and moral. So the assassin does not see the victims, they see the cause. And Lisbon destroys that insulation. So Shay pulls the trigger, believing that he is preventing tyranny, but instead, the earth itself convulses. Buildings fold like paper, civilians scream beneath falling stone. And for the first time, Shay counts bodies instead of principles. And this is the moment where freedom stops being abstract, where the greater good acquires faces, and that ideology becomes culpable. And the real death here, because what truly dies in Lisbon is not innocence, it's moral outsourcing. Because Shay realizes that if my hands cause this, I cannot hide behind the creed. And this aligns with Hannah Arendt's concept of the banality of evil, not in cruelty, but in procedural obedience. Because Shay sees that catastrophic harm does not require malice, only unquestioned alignment with a system. And Lisbon proves a devastating truth that good intentions do not absolve outcomes. And once you learn that, you cannot unlearn it.
How could God do this to them?
God had nothing to do with this.
And then we also look into Achilles' dismissal. Now, Shay, he does not rebel immediately. He just does something far more dangerous. What he does is he questions authority from within. And this moment here matters because it reveals that the Brotherhood's hidden transformation from a moral movement into a closed epistemology. So when Shay confronts Achilles, he's not accusing, he's pleading because he asks for a pause, reflection, and safeguards. But Achilles, he responds not as a mentor, but as an institution. And this is the pivot point where the assassins stop being guided by conscience and start being guided by infallibility. Because dogma replaces ethics in this scene. Because Achilles, he does not argue the morality of Lisbon. He dismisses the concern itself. And that tells Shay everything. Because in political philosophy terms, this is the moment when authority divorces itself from consequences, where leadership becomes immune to feedback and dissent is reframed as betrayal. And Shay realizes something very chilling in this, that if an organization cannot be questioned after mass death, it no longer serves humanity. It serves itself. And this is not a failure of one man. It is a systemic failure. The exact kind the assassins claim to oppose.
There's no turning back now.
I had such hopes for you, Shay.
Achilles, I have to do this.
And what is it you're doing exactly? Stealing from your brothers? Betraying me?
Someone must make amends.
Make amends? You have no idea what you're doing. The future of the whole continent, maybe the whole world, is tied up in that manuscript.
Perhaps. But we don't have the right to decide that future.
The right! We have the responsibility!
We are responsible for killing innocents and destroying cities. This mad grab for power. It ends now.
I will not let you destroy everything we have built! Assassins! Stop him! Stop Shay!
And then we also have the Assassin Codex, also known as the manuscript. So when Shay takes the manuscript, many misread it as treachery, but it's not treachery because Shay does not steal knowledge to dominate. He steals it to interrupt repetition. And this reframes espionage entirely because in Shay's philosophy, information is not power. Information is prevention. And this aligns with the negative utilitarian ethics with a moral priority of reducing suffering over achieving ideal outcomes. So Shay's logic is brutally simple here, that if the assassins will repeat Lisbon, then stopping them is not betrayal, it is obligation. So the manuscript represents institutional memory, pattern recognition, and proof that the disasters are not anomalies but consequences. So Shay becomes something rare in Assassin's Creed, a man who treats knowledge as a moral responsibility, not a weapon of supremacy. And on top of that, it's also hunting down his former brothers. And this is where Shay becomes really tragic. Not villainous, not heroic, just tragic. Because he must now act against the people who trained him, who trusted him, and shared his ideals, but no longer share his conclusions. And this is where Assassin's Creed Rogue it aligns with movies like The Departed, where loyalty goes against survival, and then Heat, where you have two professionals honoring each other while standing on opposite sides, and then Captain America: Civil War, where moral absolutism is going up against moral accountability. So Shay does not hunt down the assassins out of hatred. He hunts them because inaction feels worse. So Shay embodies the paradox of preventive ethics. To stop future bloodshed, he must spill blood now. And this is not victory, it is moral injury, because each confrontation reinforces a brutal truth that they're not evil, that they're certain. And certainty, Shay has learned, is the most dangerous weapon of all. Because unlike the assassins, Shay doesn't believe history will justify him. He acts knowing that it might not.
Sir.
Shay, it has been so long. Were you on a special mission?
Yes. From Achilles.
How interesting. So am I.
Don't make me do this, Chasseur.
Do what? Assassinate me? I thought that...
We could both just leave.
You are always good at your business, Shay.
As were you. Tell me, what are you doing inland?
Special weapons. Poisonous gases to use against colonial authorities. I am merely a delivery man.
Then may your final delivery be swift.
We trained you well, traitor.
Kesogowaase. It didn't have to be this way.
It did. You are an enemy. Achilles will see you dead.
What he's doing is wrong.
Who are you to judge? The Templars will fail. You will fail. Monroe is already dead.
What do you mean?
Liam.
Forgive me, Adewale.
You dare beg forgiveness, child? Hell welcomes traitors like you.
Then I go there proudly, knowing I have done right.
It does not matter. Achilles already has what he needs.
I will kill every last man who defends him if I must. I cannot let him succeed.
You have become a monster, Shay.
Perhaps I have.
Come.
You're late. Again, Shay.
Hope. I didn't want to do this.
I trained you to do this. I expected nothing less.
Then why?
To give Liam time to leave. Soon Chevalier will be on his way to the precursor site.
I will stop him.
He will see you coming. Pity. You had so much potential.
So, cabbage farmer, are you still convinced the Templars are right?
Convinced to the end.
Oh.
You bastard! Achilles and Liam have already headed north!
Hope was right. I do make a good distraction.
I was lucky. How many times do I have to tell you, Liam? I make my own luck.
How'd you do that, you bastard? You broke the assassins. Betrayed everyone you knew. You sided with our worst enemies. And for what?
To save the world.
I hope that world is a good one.
Why not? Achilles is harmless now. A mentor with no followers. What kind of world are we making if we cannot show mercy? Besides, he understands what these precursor sites are now. Without him, the assassins may continue their search.
Valid points. Never forget what has happened here.
I won't. But the world will.
So what happens now?
Master Gist will be in charge of eradicating any remaining traces of the assassins. Master Weeks and the others will assist him, of course.
Achilles has lost everything. He won't dare leave his homestead.
You won't. Shay, although our search for precursor sites is at an end, I want that box. You will find it for the Templar Order, and for me.
Could be anywhere in the world by now. It may take years to find it.
It may take your lifetime. Are you up for the challenge? Good.
And then we also have some comparative media and resonant characters. So when it comes to these different characters, you have Anakin Skywalker. So where he defects to control outcomes through power, Shay, he defects to prevent outcomes through restraint. So one embraces tyranny and the other embraces limitation. And then you also have a Watchman with Night Owl versus Ozymandias. Because Shay, he's not Ozymandias because he doesn't justify mass death. He's the man who refuses to let necessary evil logic proceed unchecked. And then Logan from Wolverine. So Shay, he shares Logan's burden, where he shares violence, that violence is a last resort. and that there is no glory, and that there's no absolution. And then in Sicario, there's also a cost of dirty prevention, because Shay, he understands that stopping catastrophe sometimes it means becoming morally stained. And then there's also the dynamics between with Shay versus Achilles, but also versus the Brotherhood as well, also too. So when it comes to Achilles is not a villain in the conventional sense. He's something more dangerous. He's a once correct man who stopped questioning himself. And Achilles, he represents a specific archetype, which is the survivor who confuses endurance with wisdom, because he lived through loss, he outlasted enemies, and he inherited responsibility. And from that survival, he developed the belief. So he developed the belief that his continued existence, that it validates his worldview. And this is where Achilles has gone. So this is where he goes. This is where Achilles goes wrong, because he mirrors that late stage Platonianism. Late stage Platonianism, which is the belief that truth exists independently of experience and must be enforced. And then it's revolutionary ossification, where it's the moment when a movement stops adapting and starts preserving itself at all costs. And then you also have the Weberian authority drift, which is the charismatic leadership hardening into traditional authority. So Achilles, he mistakes confidence for clarity, because he believes that because the Brotherhood has historically opposed tyranny, any action taken in its name must be righteous. Because this is moral right. So this right here is moral credentialism, which is the idea that past virtue it grants present immunity from error. And then it's blindness disguised as principle. Because Achilles' greatest failure is not cruelty, but it is the epistemic arrogance. Because when Lisbon collapses after Shay retrieves the precursor artifact, or in other words, was supposed to retrieve the artifact, but Lisbon had collapsed and the earthquake had happened, Achilles doesn't. So really, Achilles, he doesn't really ask, what if we're wrong? He asks, how do we continue? And this is the mindset of institutions that survive too long, where you have churches during inquisitions, revolutionary parties during purges, intelligence agencies after scandals, and military doctrines after civilian casualties. So he embodies the ideological sunk cost fallacy. To admit error would unravel not just strategy, but identity. So he doubles down on this. And then you have Shay. So Shay, he's not born a Templar, nor is he naturally inclined toward authoritarian order, because once again, he's rarer in the universe. He's a man who lets consequences change him. Because Shay begins as a believer, not in doctrine, but in trust. He trusts his mentors, he trusts his comrades, the moral framing of the Brotherhood. In Lisbon, it breaks that trust, not because of the malice, but because of preventable ignorance. Because his philosophical shift mirrors from moral empiricism, where the outcomes matter, not the intentions, and then post idealism, the rejection of abstract virtue when it produces real suffering, and then existential responsibility, where you are accountable not just for what you intend, but for what your actions unleash. And Shay doesn't mistake that safety for salvation unknowingly. He does so deliberately. He chooses a system that limits damage, even if it limits freedom. And that is not cowardice. That right there is moral triage. And looking at guilt as a teacher, not as punishment. Because what distinguishes Shay from Achilles is how each man responds to guilt. Because Achilles, he externalizes the guilt, that the world misunderstood us. And Shay, he internalizes guilt, where he helped cause this. And Shay's growth is trauma informed morality, because he learns that good intentions do not absolve harm, that ideals are meaningless without safeguards, that freedom without restraint becomes chaos for the powerless. So, in this way, he aligns with historical figures who broke from movements that they once loved. Whistleblowers, disillusioned revolutionaries, scientists who abandoned dangerous research paths, and veterans who reject endless war doctrines. So Shay does not abandon belief, he abandons the unexamined belief of it. And then the Brotherhood as an institution, because the Brotherhood, so really the Brotherhood in Rogue is not evil, but it is institutionally deaf. And this is critical because a Brotherhood, they prioritize the symbolic victories over human cost, and they treat treats dissent as weakness, and it frames doubt as betrayal. And this is this is classic organizational moral injury, because they no longer ask, are we protecting people? They ask, are we advancing the cause? And this is the same shift that is seen in political movements that justify collateral damage, corporations that normalize exploitation, and states that frame civilian deaths as necessary. And Shay, he threatens the Brotherhood not because he defects, but because he exposes the cost of their certainty. And that is why Achilles cannot forgive him. And then we have the generational fracture, because at its core, Shay versus Achilles is really more of a surrogate father-son conflict. Because Achilles represents the inherited truth. Shay represents the lived truth. And this mirrors the Oedipal philosophical rebellion, like Nietzsche versus Schopenhauer, and scientific revolutions, like paradigms, they collapse when anomalies pile up. And then intergenerational trauma cycles, where the elders, they defend survival strategies that no longer work. So Achilles, he teaches we fight because we are right. And Shay learns that we fight, therefore we must be careful. And this is not optimism versus pessimism. It is abstraction versus embodiment. And this right here, I want to explain this, because why is Shay is not a Templar villain, and why Achilles is not a hero. Now, Rogue's brilliance is that it refuses moral purity, because Shay's path, it reduces harm, but empowers control. Achilles' ideals, they inspire freedom, but they tolerate devastation. And this is the eternal political and moral dilemma, where you have order versus liberty, safety versus autonomy, control versus chaos. So Shay does not choose salvation, he chooses containment. And Achilles does not choose evil, he chooses identity preservation over accountability. And then we also have the learning versus certainty. So the real divide is not assassin versus Templar. It is that those who allow consequences to teach them versus those who allow ideals to shield them. So Shay bleeds and adapts. Achilles, he calcifies and commands. And that is why in Assassin's Creed Rogue, why it hurts more than any Assassin's Creed story. Because it's not about betrayal, it's about outgrowing your teachers. And sometimes the most dangerous thing that a movement can produce is a student who learns too well.
Is this the apple?
No, don't touch anything. Shay was right.
What would he know?
More than me, apparently.
Finally, you understand. Achilles. This is a structure to hold the world together, not a weapon to control it. This whole calamity could have been avoided if you'd only listened to me.
Disrespectful to the end.
Yes, we've been working on that.
Right or wrong, Shay? You betrayed the Brotherhood, Achilles, and me.
Says the man who shot me in the back.
At the homestead. That was Chevalier. I don't mess.
Him don't.
And we also have philosophical themes. So philosophical themes and questions that are raised as we progress through Shay's character. So when it comes to the themes and the questions that are raised in this, the ones that we have that are raised is loyalty moral when it enables harm? Do consequences override ideals? Is restraint a form of oppression or wisdom? Can one be righteous while serving a flawed system? Is betrayal sometimes the highest fidelity? So Shay, in this case, what he answers that I will not be loyal to a lie. And then the moral judgment and empathy of this. Now, Shay, he is not innocent, and he knows this, but his guilt is not denial. It is accepted burden, because he doesn't claim moral purity. He claims responsibility, and that distinction, it matters. And then the philosophical synthesis of all of this, because Shay represents the necessity of stopping movements that refuse self-critique. He is the internal check, the the whistleblower with a blade, the man who ends cycles by breaking faith. He embodies the idea that sometimes the most ethical act is to end the crusade, even if it means standing alone. And there also are some alternative readings or what ifs. And those, of course, are what if? What if Achilles had listened? Would the Brotherhood evolve? What if Shay had stayed silent? Would more cities fall? And what if Shay had led reform instead of defection? Would he likely been killed? Now, Rogue is not about choice. It's about what knowledge forces upon you. And then we also have philosophical lessons from Shay Cormac. And those lessons all come down to this. They come down to ideals without accountability, they become dangerous. And that loyalty must be earned continuously. And that knowledge carries moral obligations. And that prevention is thankless and bloody. And that being right does not mean being clean. And what does Shay, so what is his character? What does his character mean in his universe? And also, what's the larger cultural reflection behind his character? So we look at what Shay, looking at him as a critique of revolutionary absolutism. So revolutionary absolutism. So this is the belief that the ends justify all the means, especially when those ends are framed as freedom, liberation, or justice. So in the assassin worldview, this often manifests as knowledge is power, therefore must be seized. That authority is corruption, therefore must be dismantled. And that resistance is moral by definition. So Shay's break does not occur because he rejects freedom. It occurs because he witnesses freedom weaponized against reality. So the Lisbon disaster is not simply a tragedy, it is a moral exposure. That the assassins, they don't ask whether they should act, only how quickly they should. And their certainty, it blinds them to scale, to human cost, to second order consequences. So philosophically, Shay becomes a critique of the Jacobin logic, the idea that once a cause is declared righteous, all dissent becomes betrayal. And this mirrors the real world revolutions, where the ideals they harden into dogma, the leaders become immune to doubt, and that violence becomes self-legitimizing. So Shay's refusal to proceed is not cowardice; it is ethical friction in a system that demands obedience, masquerading as enlightenment. And then you have the cost of whistleblowing. So Shay, his story, it aligns more closely with whistleblowers than traitors because he doesn't expose secrets to gain power. He exposes the danger to stop harm. But the universe, it responds predictably because he's dismissed, he's discredited, he's cast out, and he's actively hunted. And this reflects a deep cultural truth that systems built on moral certainty cannot tolerate internal critics. And whistleblowers are especially threatening because they believe in the mission, they understand the system, and they speak from inside the ideology. So Shay's punishment mirrors figures like the scientists who were silenced for challenging consensus, soldiers that were punished for questioning unlawful orders, and activists who were expelled for refusing absolutism. And then you also have the moral loneliness of restraint. So the Assassin's Creed traditionally glorifies decisive action. Hesitation is weakness, and doubt is corruption. And Shay, he embodies the opposite archetype, the man who refuses to act when action becomes immoral. And this places him in a uniquely lonely moral space because he's not celebrated, he is not validated, he's not surrounded by like-minded peers. Because see, restraint, it offers no applause. So, and then philosophically, this aligns with the Aristotelian moderation over extremism, the negative responsibility with being accountable for harm that you allow, not just the harm that you cause. And then Albert Camus' rebel, who resists injustice without becoming its mirror. So his restraint, it cost him brotherhood, identity, and belonging. And also there's the fear of the unchecked idealism, because unchecked idealism is dangerous not because it lacks morality, but because it refuses complexity. And Shay's universe, it shows us what happens when ideals are treated as infallible, where the leaders, they stop listening and the doubt becomes treason. And then unchecked idealism, it simplifies the world into allies versus enemies, progress versus obstruction, faithful versus corrupt. And also looking at Shay, looking at him as a mirror, to the modern cultural anxiety. Now, Shay resonates today because modern culture is saturated with moral certainty without accountability. Because we live in an era of radical movements convinced of their righteousness, online mobs acting with revolutionary zeal, and ideologies that justify destruction as necessary disruption. And Shay reflects the fear that good intentions they can produce catastrophic outcomes, that moral language can excuse cruelty, and movements they can lose their humanity while claiming to defend it. So he embodies the uncomfortable question that the modern culture avoids. That what if we are the ones doing harm while believing that we are right? And that question, it destabilizes identities, movements, and narratives, which is why Shay is not celebrated. He is tolerated at best. And that, of course, ladies and gentlemen, that comes to the conclusion of the character of Shay Cormac. But overall, Shay Cormac is the man who refused to let the world burn for an ideal, because Shay is a study in the moral dissonance. Because where moral protagonists in Assassin's Creed series are defined by the ideological devotion to freedom, the Assassin's Creed, or some other higher cause, Shay's defined by his refusal to blindly commit to a cause from the outset. And Shay, he's depicted as capable, intelligent, and deeply committed because he's a loyal assassin, a man who believes in the mission and the values of the Brotherhood. Yet, unlike the typical protagonist, his loyalty is conditional. It's not rooted in dogma, but in consequence. And his journey is less about embracing a creed and more about reconciling with the unintended results of absolute action. And also, the defining moment with the Lisbon earthquake, it triggered during that mission to retrieve the Templar artifact. It serves as the psychological fulcrum of his story. Because unlike the assassins, whose framework prioritizes the ends over collateral damage, Shay experiences a profound moral awakening. And that this event, it crystallizes his central psychological tension. Because he becomes painfully aware that idealism, untempered by reason, that it carries human cost. And looking at it from a philosophical perspective, Shay can be interpreted as a sort of Hegelian figure, embodying the tension between thesis and antithesis. So the creed represents thesis, freedom as the ultimate good, an unquestionable ideal, and the Templars, in contrast, are often portrayed as the antithesis, order and control at the absolute solutions. So in doing so, he occupies a liminal space, a synthesis of caution, moral reflection, and the recognition that neither creed has a monopoly on righteousness. So he is the skeptic in a world that venerates certainty. And unlike characters like Ezio, Altair, or Connor, Shay does not seek glory, revenge, or redemption within a traditional heroic framework. His story is anti heroic, not because he's morally bankrupt, but because he defies the heroic narrative of ideological devotion. So, in typical Assassin's Creed storytelling, the protagonist's allegiance defines their heroism. So, Shay, he subverts this because his heroism, it lies precisely in what he refuses to do. He refuses to let blind faith dictate the catastrophic choices. He refuses to sacrifice innocence for a principle. And in this sense, Shay is the rare protagonist whose power lies in restraint rather than action, a narrative inversion that critiques the black and white morality of both the assassins and the Templars. And his arc, it echoes the themes from broader literature and from the media, because he shares traits with tragic vigilantes like Rorschach from Watchmen, who both operate under a personal moral code that conflicts with societal norms. And both figures are alienated by their communities, and they're compelled to act according to the eternalized ethics rather than external dogma. So, like Hamlet, Shay is haunted by the consequences of inaction versus action, because every decision, it carries weight, and his tragedy is that even morally right choices produce pain, dislocation, and estrangement. And then ultimately, Shay, he functions less as a traditional protagonist and more as a lens through which the Assassin's Creed series interrogates ideology itself, because he forces the player and the narrative universe to confront uncomfortable questions. What is the cost of blind loyalty? Can an ideal be worth the collateral it generates? What does it mean to act morally in a world dominated by absolutes? So by saying stop, where others say believe harder, he embodies a danger and a necessity of skepticism in any rigid system. And the story does not end with triumph or reconciliation. It ends with survival, estrangement, and the quiet, perilous wisdom of someone who has seen the consequences of extremism firsthand. So Shay Cormac is more than a character. He is a philosophical catalyst. He disrupts the binary narrative of assassins versus Templars, reframing heroism not as loyalty, but as moral responsibility. Because the story invites reflection on the tension between idealism and consequence, faith and reason, action and restraint. And in a universe that is defined by extremes, he reminds us that the most dangerous and perhaps the most unnecessary figures are those who resist certainty, embrace guilt, and demand accountability when others worship absolutes. So, in essence, Shay is not a savior, a villain, or a hero of freedom. He is a man who refuses to let the world burn, not for glory, not for principle, but because he sees the human cost that everyone else refuses to acknowledge.
You're the traitor. I'm just finishing old business. Old Connor and his assassins. The American Revolution undid your Templar business. Then perhaps we shall start a revolution of our own. Uphold the principles of our order, and all that for which we stand. Never share our secrets, nor divulge the true nature of our work. Do so until death, whatever the cost. This is my new creed. I am Shay Patrick Cormac, Templar of the colonial, of the American right. I am an older man now, and perhaps wiser. A war and a revolution have ended, and another is about to begin. May the Father of Understanding guide us.